Hey everybody. Okay, next up in our little project here, let's talk about waterproofing. These things will go into all kinds of terrain, all kinds of different conditions, and of course, anything electronic, water is not its friend. So we're going to need to make our electronics waterproof, and at the same time we'll also need to go through and do some preparation on the mechanical parts of the chassis so it'll better withstand the elements. This particular truck, the axles and the transmission have already been done. I did those when I built it. I still do need to do the other one, so I will talk about axles, transmission, and front and rear axle when I do the other one. We'll video that. Essentially with the mechanical parts of it, the axles and the transmissions, what I do is I pack them with marine grease. Get it all in around the bearings, around the gears, everything like that. It serves two purposes. Number one, of course it lubricates everything, it's a grease. But number two, you'll find that marine grease is very water repellent. And if the grease is there first, the water won't get there. So that's kind of my theory with that. But like I say, this one here has already been done. So we'll talk about this again in another video when we do the Jeep that we have. But right now, we're going to focus on electronics. Now, let's go over our components. We have our winch in the front and our main drive motor here. Both of which are DC motors. We're not going to do anything with them as far as waterproofing. A DC motor can survive running underwater with no ill effects. Actually, back in the old days, when we would get new motors, they were sealed and you couldn't open them, and that was actually one of the ways that we used to break in the brushes of the motors, is we would actually connect them to a power and drop them into a container of water and let them run in the water, and that would actually break in the brushes on the motor. So the motor and the winch we're not going to be too concerned with. The only thing we have to do with these is after they've been out and exposed to the elements, in moisture, anything like that, we need to make sure afterwards that we take them out, we clean them really thoroughly, and always re-lubricate the bushings or bearings in the motors, whichever they should have. Use some light oil, lubricate those, and so that would be where the moisture is going to give you your most detriment. So with that, okay, we're not going to worry about those. Now what we are going to concentrate on is our other electronic components. First off, we have our servo, our steering servo. This is the one thing that I am going to upgrade electronic wise. They're ready to run, and I'll put the same servo in this one here. This is a metal geared high torque. I think it has 200 ounces of torque, something like that. It's a very strong servo. It's metal geared, where the ready to run servo that comes in that, although a good servo, it's still, in my mind, it's not as strong a piece as this. And steering servo is something that does take some abuse, so you want a good unit there. But we want to be able to subject this to the elements without any ill effects. So we have our steering servo that we'll have to do. We have our electronic speed control. We'll have to get in and do this. This is going to be a little trickier because it does have a heat sink here on the top, and that cannot be coated with anything. So the technique with this here is a little bit different, but we'll get into that. And we have our receiver, which is You see how tiny these things are? I mean, I remember back when they were like 3 times this size. But our receiver will need to be waterproofed. And our winch control will need to be waterproofed as well. And eventually, when we put our lighting system in it, the night vision light controller will need to be waterproofed as well. So one of the things that we're going to start with, I guess we'll start with this here as it is the easiest thing. I'm going to move you down here. Is our winch control. Now, our winch control is kind of a funny little animal. It's got this little plastic case around it that's very open. It does protect it. Now, the one thing that we're going to do on both of our trucks is there is a receiver box on the chassis. And I've already done some checking, and we're going to be able to fit our winch controller and our receiver in that box. So in that box we can seal up. But we're gonna prepare both of these components anyways, just in case. I mean, always think worst case scenario. Just because a box is sealed up doesn't mean that, you know, you could have some kind of a problem and it fails on you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and this little enclosure comes off, comes apart, and we're going to take out the circuit board for our winch. This is basically the way I'm going to leave it. Seeing that it is able to go into the receiver box on the truck and it will be protected, I'm not going to worry about putting it back in this case. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take maybe a small amount of dielectric grease. And the one connector that we do have on it is this little white connector right here, and that's where our winch plugs in. We're going to pack that connector with dielectric grease. As you can see, we packed it right full. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we have our plastic dip right here. Get you guys up just a little bit so you can see this. Okay. Now, the dielectric grease is going to keep the plastic dip from filling that connector up. That's the only thing on this board that I'm concerned with. I want coated all this with our plastic dip. So basically, and it's very easy to do. All we do is you just take your component, just slowly dip it down into the dip, and it covers it. Pull it back up. Dip it back down. Bring it back up. What the plastic dip is doing is it's coating the entire component. You can apply as many coats of the plastic dip as you want and build up your layers. As you can see, it's very well encased in the plastic dip, and the plastic dip will harden and it will form a rubberized surface. And once you get that rubberized surface, it's impervious to moisture. Moisture can't get in there and harm any of the componentry on the board. So Goopy, looks like we've got pretty good coverage. We'll give it one more. It takes, after you do this, it takes about 4 hours for the Plasti Dip to dry. And what we're going to do after the Plasti Dip dries is we're just going to cut the very top off of where we coated the connector. Now our connector is full of our dielectric grease, which we put in. So we should be able to push in the connector from our winch that goes in there very easily. And that connector will actually be sealed and waterproofed with the dielectric grease. Okay, so after a little bit, it'll kind of stop dripping. And we're going to need to hang this up. That's what we're going to need to do. As you can see, if you see the little thing on there, our Plasti Dip is already starting to set up. And what you have to keep checking is as it sets up, sometimes, especially if there's like holes or something like that, they'll open back up. So just make sure that it stays the way you want it. But the Plasti Dip itself, like I say, it's already starting. If you see this drip is, no, I'm sorry. If you see that drip on there, it's less of a drip than it was. So we'll let that kind of work its way off and fall off. And there it goes. And we still. Now, here's something you have to kind of look out for. As that drip came off, you'll notice on the board right there where it was, you can see the circuitry is now exposed again. So what we're going to do, we're going to give it another little dip. Don't have to do the whole thing. Kind of happy with the rest of it as is. And we'll just let that. So basically that's how we're going to do this particular component. This is the easiest way to do it. There are other ways of doing this as well. And we'll get into that a little bit with our speed control. We're going to do our speed controller a little bit different than this component. But this component here, once this Plasti Dip sets up, like I say, it takes about 4 hours. This will be ready to go. We've just waterproofed that. So I'm gonna get this set up so I can hang it, and we'll be back and take a look at our speed control. Okay, so I took our servo apart. There's 4 screws on the bottom you take out, the top comes off and the bottom comes off. This particular servo is an Airtronic servo, very, very expensive, high-end one. Left over from racing. I had a couple of them, so I figured I'd use them here. And this servo is already O-ring sealed on the bottom and top, and has a seal in there. So it's basically water resistant. So I did the same procedure with our servo. I just put it back together. I packed the top of it with marine grease, put that on, and then I dipped the whole servo, sealing up all the seams and little crevices there. But like I say, it's O-ring sealed anyways, but it should be fine. our control board, as it dries, developed a couple of pockets that opened up. So I just dabbed in a little bit more Plasti-Dip there, but the rest of it looks good. So that's going well. Now, the next thing we've got to take a look at is our speed control, our electronic speed control. So let's take this. This is in a case as well. I think I have to, if we take off this sticker, goes around the bottom of it. I think that's actually how they hold this case together. Oh, there's little tabs. There are little tabs under the sticker. There's two little tabs. Now the speed control actually, keep our sticker and we'll put that back on. Actually locates on the outside of the receiver box. And this is a ready-to-run speed control, just like what came in the other truck. I actually picked this up off of eBay for a pretty good price. I just wanted them both to be the same, and a lot of the electronics that I have is pretty outdated at this point. So, okay, so we pop that off of there. Now, this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge. And why I say that is it fits fairly snugly in its little case, so we can't build up a large amount of the Plasti-Dip on there. What's important is that these heat sinks here on there don't get full of the Plasti-Dip. We'll just put the Plasti-Dip up to the base of them, and that will pretty much cover everything we need to cover. And there's also, right there, there's two little lights. And what we're going to have to do after we Plasti-Dip this is we're going to have to clean the Plasti-Dip off those, I don't know if the camera's picking them up or not, they're pretty small, off those those two little LED lights that are right there. So, but other than that, I think you pretty much follow the same program here. We'll just go about that deep with our Plasti-Dip. We won't get up on those. And what we may have to do to get it back in the case afterwards is we may have to trim the edges of the board with the Plasti-Dip to get it back in. A little bit. Shaky cam. Okay. Very carefully. In we go. One thing I will say, I don't think I mentioned before, that I did do before starting this whole project is I did connect all these components together, powered them up just to make sure that everything functioned correctly. before we started putting all this stuff on there. I'm not really too worried about anything here not functioning with the Plastidip on. I just don't know about the winch control, because the winch is wireless. It does it, by a remote signal. I'm not sure if the Plastidip will affect how that functions or not. But I mean, if it did, it's not the end of the world. We can do it a different way. And the nice thing about this coating too is if you want, all you've got to do is peck it open, cut it, and you can peel it right off. Get the excess off of there. Drip off. Everything's sealed up pretty good, and we've got good dip around base of the heat sinks on there, which is good. It's funny how this stuff, it doesn't take very long, and it doesn't want to drip or flow anymore. Now in the area that has those two little lights that I want to be able to see, what I will do is I will cut the Plastidip around there, and I will fill in that void with the dielectric grease, which essentially is, it's translucent. You'll be able to see the little LEDs, which you have to use to set the profiles and change parameters and so forth on this. One question I did get from the Easy Jeezy, who's our, resident Volkswagen nut, is if they made any Baja bugs in this scale. Well, the answer is there's actually a couple of companies that make some really pretty nice, Lexan Baja bug bodies that I think would fit on these chassis pretty good. Proline Racing is one that makes some pretty nice bodies. You can check them out at prolineracing.com. And the Tamiya model company out of Japan over the years has made several pretty decent bug models. Some of which are, long discontinued now, but they actually have been releasing a lot of the old vintage kits, and they were actually pretty cool. Just shaving some of this down a little bit. I don't want to build up too much on the bottom here, because we won't be able to get it back in our case. So there you have it. That's pretty much the method. What I'm going to do with the receiver is essentially the same thing I'm doing right here. I will say now that after this sets up a little bit, I'm going to put some by hand. I guess I could actually do that now. I don't know if you can see it around these capacitors here. And just get some in there around those caps. I think we didn't get real good on the back side. All it takes is, one spot for water to get in, and it could be that spot that would let it get, to a component that would have, somewhat catastrophic results, which kind of defeats the purpose of what we're doing here. So. But we're getting it all covered up. Should be good. There's been some question of heat dissipation with some of these components after they've been dipped, and in this particular application, with this here, it's such a low draw on here, and it's so easy on them. There's not a lot of heat, so it's not really an issue. If you have situations with like a hotter modified motor, something like that. Okay, we're gonna hang this and let that dry. That's our speed control. Like I say, a hotter modified, something like that, then yeah, you may have something that you have to do a little differently, But the thing with the Plasti-Dip coating is you can put it on, and like I said before, if for whatever reason it doesn't work, it's just a matter of letting it dry and then just peeling it off. But left on its own, it's pretty durable. I'm going to do our receiver exactly the same way. This thing is so tiny, I don't know if I'm going to take this apart or not. I may just, dunk the whole thing. Probably I won't do it though until I plug in the lead from our throttle servo and our steering servo, and I'll just do the whole thing and get the leads too. Do the same thing where we put dielectric grease on those terminals, and then just dunk the whole rest of the unit and do it that way. I'm thinking that's our plan there. That should work just fine. So essentially that's basically it. This is not any kind of voodoo at all. Put the dielectric grease in there, just like we did before. Kind of funny, before I started this, I didn't have any. I had a very small tube of dielectric grease and there wasn't much left in it. So there's a Radio Shack locally here, and I go to Radio Shack and I get some more. And I walked in and asked a very nice girl behind the counter for some dielectric grease, and she had absolutely no idea whatsoever of what I was talking about. So I actually got this at O'Reilly Auto Parts, where they did know what I was talking about. I guess it's a sign of the times. The times are changing. That you can't go into the into the Radio Shack and get yourself a tube of dielectric grease. I mean, they had every cell phone that you could think of in the store, and all kinds of, electric toys, but they don't have actual electronic componentry anymore. Like I say, it's just a sign of the times, I guess, but kind of weird. All right. Takes the plastic dip, well, they say 4 hours drying before it's usable. So probably I'll get this all dipped, and then I'll install all these things tomorrow morning, and that will pretty much finish up the one truck. And then I have to actually take the Jeep all apart and do the exact same thing to that. It's kind of like working with cake frosting. Kind of interesting stuff, but very easy to do, and the stuff is very inexpensive. Now, after we get all of our stuff coated with the dip, if need be, of course you can put a little bit more on any spot. I've still got that one hole that keeps coming back on this. I don't know. Keeps sucking it in. But you can just, touch it up. And like I say, and if it doesn't work out the way you want, then all you do is just peel the rubber off the component. All good. So that's essentially that. I think I'm going to cut this one off here. You guys got a pretty good idea of what I'm doing here. Essentially, you're covering all the circuitry connections, everything. So there's no possibility of water getting into it. Is essentially what you're doing. So that's essentially all it is. It's very, very easy. And on your connectors, like I say, you put the dielectric grease in, and dielectric grease will do the same thing. So probably now, what will come back when we come back next, what we'll do is I'll show the procedure for waterproofing the axles and the transmission in the Jeep. We'll take those components out, take them apart, and we'll pack those with grease and get those ready to go. But the electronics in that one would be exactly the same as what we've just done with the stuff in this. The other thing that I've done, of course, I made Y harnesses for the 2 batteries. I made 2 of them. I use, these are called Dean's connectors, and I use Dean's connectors on everything. They're a very, very good low resistance, high current connector. And these come with a cheaper style of connector on all the stuff, and the batteries come with a cheaper. I always cut them off and I put these Deans on it. I found that $2.95 for a pair, male and female, is a very, very good investment. Never, ever have a failure with a Dean's connector when it's properly soldered on. So that's just a little thing to throw out there, a little tip of what I do. So essentially, I guess that's it. So we're moving right along. We've got the Jeep as a ready to run came with a silver body on it, and I had to have another body for that. We'll be painting that body as well. There's nothing wrong with the silver body, it's brand new, but the problem is all the ready to runs come with the same body. So you have the opportunity of showing up in an event and there's 15 Jeeps there that look just like yours, and I like to have them look a little bit different. So we will be painting that one. The body that goes on the Tacoma is pretty much ready to go. I do have another one for this that I'm going to paint up for the light kit, but this is essentially what the Tacoma will look like. In the back, I have added some scale accessories you can just purchase. Gas can, fire extinguisher, some shovel, pick, and water cooler, high lift jack over here. Those are all accessories from Parma. No, actually, I take that back. That's wrong. These are Proline accessories that I bought. Once again, you can view all the stuff at ProLineRacing.com. And I always carry. There's a spare tire with all the same as the others, and there are certain times at different stages of this, they actually will require you to stop and change a tire and continue on. So that's what that one looks like. I painted that one. Of course, like saying, you paint on the inside. It's very easy to get a really nice shiny finish. So that's that one. And we'll see what we can bump with on the Jeep. Something a little different. So that's where we're at right now. Like I said, we'll be back with our next one where we'll take a look at the electronics installed in this that we just waterproofed, and we'll take a look at the Jeep as far as waterproofing the axles and transmission. So until the next time we get together,